So our next speaker is Jeremias Engelmann. Jeremias has a master's degree in computer science from the University of Karlsruhe in Germany. He was an analyst for the Phoenix Suns in 2013. Before that, posted all sorts of interesting things online, and is now an analyst for ESPN and has created their NBA player metric, Real Plus Minus, which is probably the most widely cited plus minus stat publicly now. So without further ado, Jeremias.
Hello, and welcome to my presentation on, my name is Jeremias Engelmann. Welcome to my presentation on estimating a player's influence on his teammates' box score statistics using a modified adjusted plus minus framework. Imagine yourself playing in a 2-on-2 tournament against these guys, and you can choose who you could play with. So you can either play with Carmelo Anthony of the New York Knicks, who's one of the better scorers in the game, or you can choose to play with Steve Nash, who, when he was playing, was one of the best passers in the game, and assume for some reason that you're worried about your scoring output. And I don't know, maybe your new girlfriend is in the stands and she doesn't understand basketball too well. She understands points scored and rebounds and stuff like that, but not the nuances of the game. And just a quick question, who would want to play with Carmelo? Pretty much not a lot of people. Who would want to play with Steve Nash? Yeah, more. I guess most people here in the audience know that who you play with has an influence on your own statistics. We just need to put it in a good framework and where we can estimate the influence that you have on your teammates. So what's the information we can draw from this analysis? For one, we can estimate each player's influence on his teammates' box score statistics. And we can do this for every statistic there is. We can do this for fouls, points, rebounds, steals, assists, whatever. And the other thing we can estimate is what would a player's box score statistics be if he was playing with quote-unquote average teammates. So I guess it's obvious to many that probably your shooting percentage would probably drop if you went from the Spurs to playing with the 76ers or something like that. The goals of this presentation for statisticians and coders, hopefully you'll gain the ability to replicate this analysis and thus make better predictions. The decision makers among you might better know which players might fit better together. Say you have a franchise player who's really worried about grabbing his 10 rebounds a game. You might not want to bring in another guy that grabs a rebound away from your franchise player. And for just general fans and journalists, it's probably interesting to know who raises and lowers stats of their teammates, and also who suffers or who benefits from playing with certain teammates. So the method I want to explain finally in the end is the influence on teammates method, but there's a lot of underlying methods that I'm going to have to explain first before we can actually get there. And I'm going to explain to you these basic underlying methods, which are adjusted plus minus, regularized adjusted plus minus, and 4-factor regularized adjusted plus minus. And I'm going to go from the bottom up and explain adjusted plus minus first. And the structure of this presentation is basically that for every one of those methods, I'm going to explain how does it work, what's the difference to earlier methods, and also give you a short summary of the main takeaways for each of those methods. And at the end, I'm going to give you a couple of results for the influence on teammates. Okay, first, going to adjusted plus minus. Adjusted plus minus original, developed by Vincent Sagarin, Ilardi and Barzilay, who's also in the audience, and Dan Rosenbaum, estimates a player's influence on a team's score margin. Doing this with regression analysis, where the team points are the dependent variable and the players are being coded as dummy variables. And what's kind of funny about this, or ironic I guess, is that it completely ignores any player box score statistics. So it was a metric that helped people maybe see players in an unbiased way of completely box score free metric that could tell you, okay, a guy that, like Shane Battier, he was good on defense, but never really had great box score totals would also like look good because he was helping his team. So this is like a metric that completely ignores box score statistics, but now it actually helps us getting a better grasp on statistics, on box score statistics for players now. What it does, it estimates a player's influence on team points. So the first couple of methods that I'm going to explain here all focus on influence on team, while only the last method focuses on influence on teammates. Okay, so here's a quick how-to. Oh, I need like a laser pointer. Would be good to have. It's in here maybe. The green button? Okay, cool. Thank you. Basically what we have is here on the left-hand side we have a fictitious play-by-play for a 2-on-2 with two teams, Team A and Team B, where player A1 and A2 are starting the game, B1 and B2 are starting the game, and A3 and B3 are sitting on the bench. And we have on the left-hand side here, we have our design matrix X separated into offense and defense. So we have two columns for each player. So you can see like this is the offensive column for player A1, and so the left columns here are just for offense, the right columns are for defense. And here on the right-hand side, we have the results vector Y. And we're doing this with dummy variables, so we only care whether a player is currently present on offense or defense or not. Each possession that we have in the play-by-play is going to turn into one row, so practically into one observation in our data matrix. And what we do now is we're looking for possession-ending actions. We want each player's influence per possession, so we're looking for possession-ending actions in the play-by-play. And the first possession ends basically with A2 making a 2-point jumper. So A1 and A2 are on the court, so the dummy variable gets activated for this specific row. B1 and B2 are on the court, but not playing on offense, but playing on defense, so the dummy variables for defense are activated. And since it was a made 2-point jumper, we get a 2 here in the results vector. Going further, B1 misses a layup, but the missing layup doesn't like end the possession yet. There could be an offensive rebound, and we actually ended the possession with the defensive rebound, in which 0 points were scored. So there's a 0 here in the results vector. B1 and B2 are now on offense, and A1 and A2 we're now on defense. And then player A1 gets replaced by player A3, which will lead to this made jumper by A3. The dummy variable for A1 is not activated anymore since he's not on the court anymore, but A2 and A3's dummy variable are still activated, while for defense the picture hasn't changed. What's important to note about this, we do this for every possession there is in the NBA, so it's 1,230 games times 190 possessions per game, basically. If you play a lot of like possessions with LeBron James, then the system is essentially adjusting for the fact that you're playing with LeBron James, and you will be given the great impact that you might seem to have given standard plus minus. How do we get to the coefficients? APM uses ordinary least squares regression, and given the x and the y that I just explained how we get there, we are trying to compute the coefficients, and those coefficients are the beta that minimize this sum over here, so it's y minus beta x squared, and we get those beta by solving beta as x transposed x and the whole thing inverted times x transposed y. And the problem with this approach is that there's a high degree of multicollinearity and noise in the data set. So what ordinary least squares regression does is overfitting. And I'll give you just a quick word on overfitting. We have two different pictures here. The red dots are the same in both pictures, and in the above we have a simple line fit through the dots. And in the bottom picture, we have like a complicated function that goes through the dots. And the complicated function fits the dots a lot better than the simple function up here. But I think most people would probably agree that the above, or this function doesn't represent the true nature of those dots very well. And we're fitting the data too precisely, which is going to lead to suboptimal predictions. What do we mean by that? This function would expect new points to appear here or appear up there, which is probably unlikely. Okay, going further. Important to know about the last method is basically we're using dummy variables in the regression, but the problem that we had with the ordinary least squares method that we had overfitting. Now we're going to do regularized adjusted plus minus, which Joe Sill came up with at the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference in 2010. And what we do, instead of using ordinary least squares regression, we use rich regression. And we're introducing a quadratic penalization of the coefficients. So what we do is, instead of just minimizing that sum that we had originally, we're adding this penalization term here over here, which is lambda times the Euclidean norm of beta. And we get those beta by adding this penalization term here in the middle, where lambda is the penalization parameter, and we're going to find that through cross-validation. So we want to get the best. We're going to choose the lambda that gives the best prediction, best out of sample predictions, and I is basically essentially the identity matrix. Going further, we're now I'm going to explain four-factor RPM. The four factors of basketball, which are effective field goal percentage, which is standard field goal percentage adjusted for adjusted for three-pointers made, so three-point shooters get a boost here, as they should. Rebounding, another factor, turnovers, and also free throw rate. And we can do the same analysis that we did before, which was on team score margin. We can do this for pretty much every one of those factors. So we can estimate a player's influence on his team's rebounding or his team's turnovers. And there's only a small change that we have to do. Basically, instead of looking for possession-ending actions as we were before, we're basically just looking for shots. And there was a shot here. That's the play-by-play that we had before. And we're essentially, that was a shot here. That's going to turn into one observation. And this shot over here didn't turn into an observation before because it didn't end the possession back then. But now it does, because we're not looking for possession-ending actions. We're looking for shots only. And so this rebound doesn't turn into one observation, but instead this shot already turns into an observation. So this is how we get a player's influence on team's effective field goal percentage. And finally, how to estimate a player's influence on his teammate statistics. What you need to do is basically the defensive columns. We're doing this here for also estimating a player's influence on his teammates' effective field goal percentage. And the defensive columns are the same as before. We have the same play-by-play as before. And what we did is basically we split up the offensive column, which was one big column set for all players, which had each player once. We're going to split this up and have two offensive columns for each player. The gray ones over here, the blue-gray ones, they signify when a player is actually, like in this case, taking a shot. And these yellow, pinkish ones over here, they signify when a player was on the court, but not actually taking the shot. So now we actually care about who was taking the shot. Before we only cared about whether a player was actually on the court or not, but now we actually care who took the shot. And since here in our first observation, player A2 made a two-point jumper, he was the one who took the shot, so his dummy variable for this shot-taking column here gets activated. And A1 was on the court, but he was not taking the shot, but he was just on the court while someone else took the shot, so his dummy variable over here gets activated. Going on, B1 misses a layup, so B1's dummy variable for shooting gets activated, and B2's dummy variable for being on the court while somebody else shot the ball gets activated. So the original offense columns just get split up into, in this case, being a shooter or just being a bystander while somebody else shoots. And what we also need to do, unfortunately, for shooting, the situation is pretty simple. We know who shot the ball, but if we want to estimate a player's influence on his teammates' rebound percentage, it's a lot more complicated because there's 5 potential players who could grab the rebound. So each potential rebounding opportunity, so each missed field goal attempt is going to turn into 5 observations. And each player is a potential rebounder once, and each of his, like this is a 5-on-5 now, and each of his 4 teammates are bystanders while this guy could potentially grab the rebound. And in this particular scenario, only player 3 actually grabs the rebound, so his results vector gets a 1, while everybody else does not grab the rebound. There's only 1 rebound, obviously. And these guys did not grab the rebound. Further, we need to do a couple of changes to, or one change to penalization. Now we have 3 types of columns. Before we only had 2, offense and defense. Now we have offense and acting, and being on offense and just being a bystander, and the defensive column as well. But the influence of each column on the outcome is different. So who's taking the shot has a bigger influence on who's on the court with you. Like Kyle Korver has a bigger influence on the shot going in, just the guys that are on the court with him. So we need to do different penalization for each column type, and thankfully we can use the same standard rich regression formula, and the only thing we have to do is we're going to have to turn lambda into a vector instead of a single number. And what we do is essentially this P1 here is the penalization value that we're going to use for shooting or for being the rebounder, and P2 would be the penalization value we have for being on the court while somebody else shoots or somebody else could potentially grab a rebound. Well, P3 would be the penalization value for defense. And some results here, we have influence on teammates' points per shot, so that's like effective field goal percentage, but with like free throws factored in. And what you can see, LeBron James, Manu Ginobili, Monta Ellis, Marshall, Chris Bosh, they have really good influence on their teammates' points per shot, while Archie Goodwin, Jordan Hill, Biyombo, and Kufus have not. Basically, we have, I would say, really good passes here on the positive influence, with like Chris Bosh being good for like floor stretching, so it makes it easier for teammates to drive to the hoop. While at the bottom here, we have a couple of players that are not really good passers, and they're also clogging the lane, I guess, because they don't really have they can't shoot from far away from the basket. Influence on teammate defensive rebounding percentage. On the top here, we have a couple of not so well-known players, I guess, but their teams have pretty much rebounded the same, with the same percentage with them on the court versus with them off the court, but they themselves don't really grab a whole lot of defensive rebounds. So the system concludes that these guys up their teammates' rebounding percentage, while here the players at the bottom, really well-known, great defensive rebounders, and these guys all reduce their teammates' rebounding percentage on defense. Influence on teammate turnover percentage, you obviously want to lower teammate turnover percentage, which is good. Here at the top, you have a bunch of really high usage guys, like Russell Westbrook, Harden. They have the ball a lot in their hands, and so they're going to lower your turnovers because you just don't have the ball as much. Well, those guys, those guys at the bottom, they don't really want to shoot or have the ball in their hands, so they're going to give it up, and in turn, going to up your turnovers, unfortunately. And influence on teammates' points per possession. Here, again, at the bottom, a couple of really high usage guys, they want to score, so that's going to make it harder for you to score. And these guys here at the top, most of these don't really want to score, so they're just going to give you the ball and hope that you score. And further, who benefited from playing with teammates that raise your points per shot? So we can actually like get an estimate what would a player's points per shot be if he was playing with average teammates. And we have a couple of players here who used to be on the Heat. Shane Battier, he shot 1.07 points per shot when he was with the Heat 2 years ago, and the expected points per shot with average teammates that we would give him is actually 0.98. And same with Ray Allen. He had really high points per shot with Miami, but it probably would have been lower if he had played on an average team. And also have a couple of Golden State Warriors here who have the benefit of playing with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. And also a couple of Spurs players obviously have the benefit of playing with a lot of good passers. Outlook. There's research that can be done regarding what type of players have positive influence on their teammates' box score statistics. So maybe through clustering algorithms, we can find out whether like floor stretchers have a positive influence on their teammates' field goal percentage, or obviously good passers probably also have a positive influence. And further, we can also compute estimates for different sports and leagues. So this is something that we can also do in hockey for the NHL, for example. And that's it. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions. No, wait. Got to record it. You want to hear what you say, Luke?
I'm wondering, with ridge regression, which inherently shrinks everything towards zero.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for all the players? Does it make sense to shrink point guards towards centers, etc.?
You could do things differently for each position, but you would first have to figure out where you want to shrink each position towards to. So you're going to have to start with like a statistical plus minus first before you can actually like shrink different positions to different like priors. That's definitely something that could be done, and it makes a lot of sense. Like for, of course, like influence on teammates' field goal percentage. We're assuming that guards have a better influence, like big guys. That makes a lot of sense, and that's also one of the research areas that we'll look into.
I have a question that's maybe along the same lines with ridge regression. I'm not sure if it's actually needed. It would be a lot of fun to play around with this, but there's always a danger that you just build in a structural multicollinearity because you have too many indicators in your data set. And it seemed to me like that might have been the case with your first model.
Yeah.
There's nothing tying down the coefficients, and if you think a little bit more carefully how you specify the model, it might be just fine using regression without needing to go up to something.
It might be possible, but you would probably have to delete a lot of the columns, and which with rich regression you have the benefit of you can just leave everybody in there and not like deal with any like how do we specify the model in a different way, because rich regression deals pretty well with the multicollinearity and the noise given. Well, there's obviously different approaches, but I think this is. I don't see like how ordinarily sparse regression would probably work there.
So I'll follow up on Jay's comment. So, I mean, have you thought about instead of ridge regression, just simply imposing, several linear constraints? So,
no, I am.
All right, because I was going to say, like, because you're mentioning getting rid of columns. Another way to do it would be to just, force, the sum of all the indicators for each individual player, just to that's going to be a fixed sum, and then you could just sort of subtract out the actual value. So it still is the same number of degrees of freedom in the model by like doing the same thing of getting rid of a column, but it's maybe a slightly better way.
I have to look into that.
Okay.
Do you find any players that would have benefited if they just had average players? So they're the...
Oh, yeah. I mean,
just curious.
It depends on the stat, obviously, but for shooting percentages, you can see that, like, if you're playing on the 76ers, you would probably benefit from playing with just average guys. And for offensive rebounds, you probably benefit from not playing with the Cleveland Cavaliers because they have Tristan Thompson, they have Kevin Love. So yeah, if you're playing on a different team rather than Cleveland, then that's probably a good thing. But it depends on the stat, and it obviously depends on the year, on who you're playing with.
One last question.
Have you or the other folks at ESPN thought about potential applications with football, with the value of a nickelback versus a linebacker, or on offense a slot receiver versus another tight end?
Unfortunately, I'm not really big into football, so I haven't thought about it yet. But I mean, there's obviously application that we could bring this to several different sports, and as long as there's a decent amount of substitution being made during the game, then you can probably bring this to any sport that does it.
Let's